Greetings, attendees and participants. I'm Dr. Richard L. Thurston of counsel to Duane Morris, a global law firm with offices throughout the world, and also a proud member of the International Advisory Group to the IIPCC, which is the International IP Commercialization Center. I've been practicing law on the international matters and with a specialty in intellectual property, for over 40 years. And I've been very fortunate to have the opportunities in the past to work both in-house as Assistant General Counsel at Texas Instruments and also as General Counsel and Senior Vice President at Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. We're here today to speak about NFTs, non-fungible tokens. We at the IIPCC have been paying particular attention to various aspects of big data, artificial intelligence, and as related to intellectual property. As an NGO and advising many organizations such as WIPO, as well as national offices for intellectual property matters, such as Malaysian Intellectual Property Office, Singapore, China, the United States, and many, many countries in the world. In fact, our latest new member is from Cameroon. We're very proud to be able to service these various organizations around the world. As you are aware, NFTs are a form of cryptocurrency, and they are playing an increasingly important role in the universe of big data. Of course, big data is a key element of the cryptocurrencies, all the information that is compressed into the mining of these various non-fungible tokens and other assets. From a business perspective, NFTs include a number of considerations when you are addressing them in this very quickly evolving world as we see it. Anything with value that could be stored digitally certainly can be considered. We know it is increasingly becoming a unique record, electronic record representing ownership of intellectual property that is uniquely identifiable. And we're seeing primarily artists using this, but many others, and I'll get back to the artistic element and use of it in a little bit. The authenticity of the underlying IP is digitized, cloud, blockchain certified. And then this enables the validation, verification of the authenticity of the particular artwork that's being sold, licensed, otherwise transferred through the NFT process. As I mentioned, increasingly used by artists of many forms, whether it's the painting world, the musician, movie publishers, writers, poets, branding companies as well are all turning toward this. I've been amazed by the amount of information, amount of different artistic compositions that are out there during this stage. This is, as we, I think, in the legal profession and the IP profession look at it, as a new age IP monetization tool. And this instrument then is, as a monetization instrument, also comes with a number of restrictions and requirements throughout the world. And this is a constantly evolving atmosphere, that we're encountering. If done right, then the artists take control over their creations. And this is something that I think has to be paid close attention to, particularly with all the data that is underlying it and how they present it and move it digitally. It is perfect for tracking of royalties and other payments. And as I will briefly mention, though, that also has to take in consideration a number of legal requirements when you're looking at that form of a monetization. Same thing with dividends. As you know, all governments have requirements that are related to the reporting of those types of financial transactions. It is also an enabler, for tracking certain IP infringement, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, particularly as it relates to IIPCC's IKR, International and Knowledge Registry. It's a very important element of protecting your information, particularly trade secrets, which we've customized it for at this point in time. As a lawyer and as the advisor to the IIPCC, we focus on the role of intellectual property and its commercialization, and have expanded over the last year or so to cryptocurrency, NFTs, and other forms of digitalized transactions. This is very important, particularly when you look at the elements of NFTs that really make it an important tool for intellectual property, but also by which we must be very careful. For example, it's modifiable. It's an enabler of artistic collaboration through layering by different artists, whether it's additive or interpretational. My son is using this tool for his art work and also does it in a collaborative sense. There are programmable elements. This is something that when I started my career with Texas Instruments, we talked about the programmable semiconductor device. Today, we're talking about it in programmable elements that are very similar to, and in fact, I draw a lot of experience into this area by looking at that, including programmable privacy features. These are very important in the big data area. We're very concerned about how private core information, particularly intellectual property, can be maintained. So, looking at privacy preservation tokens is one key element, that we need to address. This is multidisciplinary. So NFTs can deal with various other art forms. You can combine them. As I said, there is a collaborative element, but what you also have to be careful for, and I'll remind you later, is make sure that none of your work that's being used combined is violative of other parties' intellectual property rights. And this is combining art with other art medium, with other types of medium that is used to convey knowledge, quite honestly. So NFTs are constantly expanding the scope and providing a lot more control by the creator, by the originator. Of course, that sort of control does pose issues for some organizations, people around the world, and governments, because it may be less able to be regulated. A foundational question going forward is, can an NFT become, in part or in whole, a business IP asset having clear economic value? I believe it most certainly is one. It itself can be a proprietary business asset or element. It has both present and, properly done, future economic value. And this is also important consideration when we talk about trade secret elements as well. It provides certain foundational, but perhaps not all elements of a formula or process, design, and compilation. Again, would be important for trade secret consideration. It is certainly licensable and sellable as part of a technology transfer. When we're looking at this element of increasingly, the big data world. I do see it as having significant product and market adaptability, which we must be careful then to protect in that environment. And as I mentioned earlier, we're increasingly seeing it as a branding tool for different, whether it's organizations, businesses, or also artists, in fact. It's combining a number of related technologies, related innovations with IP, and it's, I think, going to be seeing expanded use. I've been constantly amazed if you go and Google, you do a lot of search in other search engines, how much NFT usage is actually out there already. It incorporates, quite honestly, a proof of work system. And as I said, I'm increasingly working with folks to enhance the privacy protection features of an NFT. And I think, when you combine all this together, it meets the most fundamental and well exceeds requirements to establish a trade secret. So this is not just a matter of say copyright protection, but also trade secret protection in increasing commercial transactions. So therefore, an NFT could very well qualify as a trade secret. It can satisfy, as I mentioned in my previous slide, the key legal elements of a trade secret. Undoubtedly, it can. It can create and comprise a sequential order. It's storing metadata and other trade secret protectable information, beyond a doubt. The owner of the underlying work could continue to own the rights, including copyrights, of course, the trade secrets, as we discussed, and one of the questions that we're dealing with respect to even patent applications, what is the degree of consideration of whether or not this has been published for purposes of disclosure. I think when we're looking at all these various elements, what's increasingly important, very significantly so, is the importance of a well-written, smart contract for NFTs. We have to remember in all big data areas, when we're dealing with data as information and as a fungible commercial asset, that we have to determine, what is the scope of the IP rights and what are the limitations on the NFTs. This is very important for the creator, the artist, the collaborator, to understand initially what is the goal and objectives for the NFT. Obviously, much of the stuff that you see out there, the creativity, is artistic work which someone is trying to sell, to promote his unique skill set. However, as this expands into other areas relating to commercial transactions, then just like any license agreement, any transaction whereby which some element, some aspect of intellectual property rights is being transferred, you have to make sure you understand what your end game is in moving forward with this as a media for your commercial transactions. Licensing trade secrets, I've been exploring with some potential clients, licensing them through NFTs or using it as part of the tool, and thereby which you are able then to use this also as a royalty generating part of that license transaction. So this is important, and as I mentioned earlier, and I'll mention it one more time, it's extremely important to define and to design your NFT project to comply with existing laws, and I think also to evolve into new standards as we see intellectual property as an evolving tool set. I remember when I first started to practice law as a law clerk in 1976, the copyright law underwent its first major amendments, since it had been created. And now, since then, since 1976, we have seen numerous changes to the copyright law, just as I think we are seeing and have seen changes to other intellectual property laws and regulations. So the advent of big data and now this currency element of it with cryptocurrency and NFTs, I think is going to require further modification of our laws in order to make them more flexible and reliable in this new age that we're seeing. When we combine all that I've talked about with the IIPCC's IKR, this is our knowledge registry, which enables you to get a point in time of creation, particularly for trade secrets registration, so that you know that it was created and existed at a certain time. And then with the other secrecy functions that we have been talking about, the NFT becomes a very powerful, trade secret tool. So I want to encourage you all to think about this, and particularly how, when combined with the commercialization of a variety of big data, this becomes even more critical to your future success in a protected environment rather than a free-flowing, world where the creations, the innovations are largely dedicated, to the public. We have to avoid that. And this is particularly true for any artists or advisors to artists that are listening, watching this tape today, and such as my son and my daughter, who are using NFTs and associated data to reach a increasingly growing larger base of followers, of supporters, for their creative energies. I emphasize that in their work, as well many others are that I've been consulting with, the uniqueness and originality of their work, which then can be easily authenticated through this process. Just like the IKR I mentioned for IIPCC then can easily authenticate, while keeping everything else secret, the authenticity of that particular date of creation of the trade secret. You must make sure that your particular NFT platform, there are many different platforms out there, that platform is reputable, reliable, and of course secure, that it can protect your property, because you'd hate to see it be hacked into and disappear. That would then perhaps open it up to other violations of your intellectual property rights. I referred to earlier, and this is a growing area and still waiting for court decisions to take place relating to the regulatory and compliance requirements that need to be met by NFT blockchain platforms. So as we move ahead in the months and years ahead, we'll be paying even more close attention to what the various government agencies come up with respect to their, of course, expanding scope of their regulations. I mentioned earlier user controls. Make sure that you constantly keep in mind that the issuer, the inventor and issuer, controls the IP rights. So therefore, you also want to make sure within this digital world that you comply with the legal requirements, such as for notice of IP. I also discussed briefly that as you think about where you're heading with this project of yours, are you just selling it, and selling limited rights? Or are you looking to generate royalties, a stream of revenue, such as if you're transferring technology and through this particular tool? So what is the royalty structure, if any? We are, many of us, familiar with copyright law and what is the fair use doctrine, also some of the regulations dealing with distribution. And I think these will be addressed increasingly in the future by governments, and particularly by the courts and administrative agencies that have to deal with it. And I just want to emphasize one last time that the underlying contractual relationship needs to be fully considered as you move forward with the use. You need to have a game plan. you need to map it out. Just like you would writing a book, where are you taking this in what would become probably an expanded business for you going forward, future. So stop and think about what NFTs, what role they can play. I do believe they're with us, although they may become more regulated. But carefully stop to think that they can be a good, useful tool. But how are you going to apply it to your particular business, to your artwork, to your music, to your compositions going forward? And please feel free to call on us at IIPCC. Of course, if you have other questions for me in my law capacity, I'm more than happy to respond. So thanks again. This has been a great conference so far, and I look forward to listening to, watching other presentations. So until soon, please stay safe and remain well. Thank you, and please take care. Bye-bye.